Hi everybody, it's Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we continue our discussions on culture. And what we hope to be doing during this series is answering at least these first four questions. What exactly is culture? We talked about that last time around, and there's much discussion about what it is and where it comes from, and what sorts of things contribute to the culture of an organization or of a group. We talked a little bit about what the point of culture was, and when it comes to more of a corporate culture, we said that most companies we work with tend to view culture as being a means to an end. So they are really wanting to modify culture, enhance culture, if it means they're going to have higher levels of productivity. But there's other companies out there who want to create culture for culture's sake and say, if we create a really great culture and it attracts the kind of people that resonate well with that culture, well, then we can do anything from there. And so one is very culture driven and the other one views culture as being a means to an end. So we talked at least about those 2 points of having culture. And in general terms, we talked about why any group of people have a certain culture associated with them. And they do that in order to, on the one hand, stand out, but on the other hand, feel a sense of belonging to something. So we talked about that. Well, we're going to talk a little bit today about what makes one better than the other. And sooner or later, we got to get around to where do these different cultural leanings live on the change grid. So if there isn't just one better than another, if multiple cultures can produce the kinds of outcomes people are looking for, well, then does that mean there are multiple places on the change grid that culture can exist that can lead to a positive outcome? That's what we're going to be looking at. Well, last time around, I think it was David or a combination of you were chatting about that culture is ultimately a reflection of the leader in an organization, or certainly can be a reflection of the leader in an organization. And so leaders change their behavior. They in turn could be changing the culture. So I thought, well, let's do a little deeper dive into that. Let's see. And to do that, we basically said, well, let's take a look at an exercise we do from pride-based leadership. And in pride-based leadership, one of the big exercises we do is called the 4 facets of leadership. And the 4 facets of leadership are basically just different things that leaders tend to use as buckets to put different activities inside. And so we divide those leadership into these 4 different buckets. And so the first bucket is leading the family. Leading the family is anything that you're doing. By the way, this is a recap. We did kind of go through this as a discussion last time around, but leading the family is anything you're doing to make sure that the people who are involved are getting along with one another, feel appreciated, feel like they're being properly utilized, anything about making sure they're working well as teams, getting along with one another, resolving conflict as it arises, anything at all that has to do with the people being the right people, getting along with everybody. This is what leading the family is really all about. So creating that sense of community, etc. Leading the future is all about being able to articulate what the future is supposed to look like. Where are we trying to go? What are we trying to accomplish? What's our mission? What's our vision? What's our purpose? All this kind of stuff that really talks about what the company or the organization can become, can grow into. This is what leading the future is really all about. So it has to do with formulating what that future might look like. It includes articulating what that vision looks like, getting people rallying behind whatever that future is, clearly communicating it in a myriad of different venues. So whether you're being interviewed somewhere or whether you're doing a kind of a state of the organization sort of an address, leading the future is all about those kinds of visionary, mission, purpose-driven sorts of comments. Leading the focus is all about making sure that oh, by the way, you guys, I did send you all a little handout. I don't have it handy at the moment. So if someone wants to chat it to everybody, if you do happen to have it handy, feel free to chat to everyone. You should be able to distribute that form if you have it handy. But anyway, it looks like this. little exercise sheet. So across the top, we just put family, focus, our family, future, and then we'll put the other two, focus and facts. And then we provide our little bit of a description so people can write a little note to remind themselves of what it's all about. And then we're going to do our real exercise. So we had leading the family right here, getting sure everyone gets along, leading the future, the vision, etc., leading the focus. Leading the focus is all about making sure that the tasks that need to get done today get done today. So this is about knowing how one is going to make that vision, mission, and purpose become reality, what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, what resources they're going to require, all those good sorts of things that have to do with making sure that today is as productive of a day as it can be. That's leading the focus. And then leading the facts is in the fourth column is all about keeping track of things. So there are important key performance indicators. There are important metrics that different organizations might want to keep track of. And this is about keeping track of them. It's also about taking that data and understanding what the data is really saying to you, and in turn letting that data inform your next group of decisions. So what's going to be different moving forward because of that. So these are the four facets of leadership: leading the family, leading the future, leading the focus, and leading the facts. Any questions, comments about those four different facets of leadership? No?
Nope.
And here is your first gifted student's question. Only two of those are actual leadership, and the other two are management. So, or another way to look at it is two of these facets are transformational in nature, making sure that something grows into what it can be. And two of them are more transactional, just making sure that the right things are happening in the right way at the right time, frequently enough to add up to something. So which two of these are transformational? Which two of these are transactional? And by the way, transformational is obviously the more leadership skills, and the transactional stuff is more the management sorts of stuff. So which ones are management? Which ones are leadership?
Well,
So
family
and future.
Family and future. This is our leadership. Leading focus and facts to be the management sorts of things. Now, why do we talk about this in a program on leadership and pride-based leadership? And just as a reminder to everyone, you've heard me say this many, many times, I truly believe that leadership as the set of unique skills that it truly is, has fallen by the wayside. Pretty much over time, management and leadership have been blended together into one homogenous kind of label or set of behaviors or whatever, and it's nonsense. Leadership is a very unique kind of a thing. And in pride-based leadership, obviously, we go through what those key skills are of true leadership, but most everything else falls in the category of management. And so today, we can look at different let's say outlines of leadership classes, leadership courses, even at the academic level, leadership curricula. And you can very quickly realize that a great deal of what's being talked about is really management behaviors, not leadership, uniquely things unique to leadership. And so these two, we'll just do the basic thing, leading the family and leading the future. These are definitely leadership kinds of sorts of things, and the other two are management. So here's where the exercise comes into play. I ask my audiences to think about their organization as they experience it. Those are four very important words. It's the organization as they experience it, not the organization as they've read about in print, or the organization as they would like it to be, or the organization as they hear it is in other areas, or what it's supposed to be doing. You know, it's not, no. It's about assessing the organization as you actually experience it. Now, I know David has got a project coming up with a client, and he wants to use this as a bit of a framework for the work that he's doing with them for coaching. So David, do you want to take a minute and explain what your thought about using this exercise with your group is all about?
Yeah, you know, we've done some cultural due diligence, and we're in the midst of some leadership coaching. They've been through change works, and some of them have been through master stream.
Mhm.
but there's a lack of I want to refocus on the coaching, and I want to refocus the coaching around some meaningful measures.
Mhm.
So I can't think of anything more meaningful than family, future, focus, and facts.
Yeah, yeah.
And to get them to articulate whether or not they think there's too much emphasis, not enough emphasis, or just right.
Yeah, exactly right. And so again, we started talking a little bit about this last time around. And so we want them to talk about what happens in general terms. So forget the organization for just a second. Let them just kind of talk about what could happen in general terms in an organization that puts too much emphasis, too little emphasis, or just the right amount of emphasis on a given facet. So what do you think happens if an organization puts too much emphasis on leading the family? And by too much emphasis, I mean they not only factor in what's going on the family side of things, but it basically runs the show. So first and foremost, their top priority is let's make sure family is exactly how it could be. What can we do to make the family? So again, just kind of let the words too much emphasis take your mind wherever it goes when it comes to leading the family. What does that translate into? So what do you guys think happens if an organization puts too much emphasis on leading the family?
Lack of results and accountability.
Will be the diminished results, diminished accountability. I mean, I like to think sooner or later they're going to get something done, but who knows? Maybe it's just become a big social event. So what else? What else could happen if you put too much emphasis on family stuff?
Not enough focus on the future.
Not enough focus on the future, because generally speaking, if family tends to be more concerned about things that are happening in the now. It's not business related, it's just about them as people. And so that's not only pulling them away from work, it's pulling them away from where things are supposed to be heading. So yeah, what happens if we put too much emphasis? And I said last time around, you run the risk of becoming a social services agency.
Right.
So does all of a sudden being given a certain number of sick days, or needing to have some sort of accountability when it comes to arriving on time and, putting in your day's work and that sort of a thing, are we ignoring that altogether because, hey, people have got this going on, they've got kids, they've got, I mean, the excuses can come and come and come. You can expect to have a lot more of that happen when the emphasis is placed very highly on leading the family. And so it can start to become a bit of a social service agency. All right, let's go to the other end. What about too little emphasis? What do you think happens in an organization that doesn't put the right amount of emphasis on the family? So it gets
Turnover.
high levels of turnover. Why? Why would they be leaving?
People feel
Well,
disenfranchised.
They feel disenfranchised. They don't feel like they're noticed or they really matter. It's pretty much, I mean, you've heard this, all of you work with lots of different kinds of clients. You've heard them say, I'm just a number. I'm just another little cog in the giant machine, yeah. So the people don't feel very valued. They don't feel very recognized or acknowledged. One of the things I said about leading the family is making sure people know how to handle conflict, or can be open and candid and participate and collaborate and all those sorts of things. Well, we know whenever you get people talking about their thoughts, friction is is likely to occur because different people have different viewpoints. They might rub up against each other. Well, if I've never really helped people to get along better, to form good teams, know how to approach things, if that's all been ignored, well, what do you think happens to internal conflicts with employees?
Yep.
I mean, they're
Lack
there.
of emotional intelligence.
Lack of emotional intelligence, right? It all just kind of stews. It becomes very understated, but overfelt. People feel begrudging against one another. You get all those kinds of icky sorts of things happening there if I put too little emphasis. Now, of course, what do you think happens if we put the appropriate amount of emphasis on that particular facet, leading the family? The right amount?
Happy, productive people.
happy, productive people who feel not acknowledged, appreciated, or, all those good sorts of things are going to happen there. They get along with one another. They can handle whatever disagreements they happen to be having. They can bring out the best in each other. Okay, questions, thoughts about leading the family? Too much, too little, or just the right amount?
Well, it sounds to me like if you've got the right amount, then you're going to have these engaged individuals. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking in the context of where this falls on the change grid. But if you've got not enough focus, it kind of puts it into apathy. Become apathetic about, their work.
Yeah, because they start to go through the motions. Why should they do anything above and beyond
Right.
whatever they're being fairly compensated for? Because they don't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing really matters. So there's no, loyalty is going to suffer very much.
So the vertical axis for me seems like, if you're using the same scale you just had, -7 would be at the bottom, +7 would be at the top, upgrid. And then, right. And so you're going outgrid basically, the more closer you are to 0.
Yeah, and probably the layer we want to look at for this one would be about, let's see, engagement rings. Where's my engagement ring layer? La la la, da da da, da da da, da da da. Where's my engagement rings? Oh, well, these, the blue ones. We go this way. So I think that you're absolutely right. As people's loyalty goes down, they leave engagement, which is right here altogether, and they even start to suffer in low downgrade intentions. They start falling by the wayside. Awareness suffers, and they end up hypo-aware from what's really going on. Yep. Okay. So now in the exercise, the next thing I would do is then say, okay, so now thinking about the organization, your organization as you experience it, do you believe your organization is putting the appropriate emphasis on it, too much or too little? And just circle whatever number applies. Now, even in appropriate, I got to explain the scale at some point. So you can be flat at the appropriate emphasis. You could be a little bit or a little bit more emphasis leading towards, but then you can get into too much, and there's 5 levels of range there as well. And similarly, if you're putting appropriate emphasis, there could still be a couple little minus points there, but the real too little emphasis has 5 little points that you could go at as well. So rate your organization from 0 all the way up to 0.7, 0 all the way down to -7 to see where you happen to be.
T, is there any magic to why the scale is ±7 as opposed to ±6 or?
No, honestly, I've never tried to make it map to the change grid for that. So I just chose the number to irritate my audiences as much as I could. Well, because they always want to go to a 5-point Likert scale.
Mhm.
Or a 7-point Likert, and it says, people, come on, we want more subtleties and nuances. Human beings don't fall into 5 buckets or 7 buckets. We each have our own bucket. So I generally do these anytime I've been asked to put together a scale. I deliberately choose something that annoys people. Just to shock them out of that pattern. Like even if you look at the change grid, people go like, well, it's a 12-point scale. No, it's 13. It goes from 0 to 12. So, and there's a reason we chose this particular one because of the overlays and that sort of a thing. But people just shake their head and go like, I always laugh when someone says this too. They say, well, a human being really can't make more than 7 points of distinction along a continuum. And it's like, I just kind of go like, who do you know that can't put more than 7 points of distinction along a continuum? I mean, here we have 12, and you guys have been using the change grid for a long time. How often have you administered this to someone who's a technical type or whatever, and they go, well, I'm kind of like a 9.5. Maybe a 10 1/4. They don't even think that 13 points is enough points of distinction. They want to break it down into decimal factors between them. So, yeah.
So when you're doing the exercise, T, do you see a gap between how employees are experiencing their environment and what the leaders experience? Because I could think like down, the power apathy, where I call it sustainable mediocrity, right?
Right.
So there's a reason why that happens. And oftentimes the leader will get it or, come
Yeah.
conscious of it when they're trying to strategize for growth. But that's been long existing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they come to the consultant, like train my people kind of a
Of
thing.
course. Yeah. Because there's nothing wrong with them. Yeah. Yeah. No, I do. I find that the executives are just as what I say engaged. Their eyes are open just as much as an employee, like a rank and file person sitting in the audience. Because I don't think that until they do this exercise, they've ever even thought about this.
Mm.
They just keep, they think that leadership is just some like thing, instead of being a set of behaviors and, groupings of behaviors that you focus on. And what happens if you put too much, too little, or whatever. And so as we finish this and we talk about this, you'll find out that depending on the kind of organization you're running, you may want a very different scatter pattern on this, because ultimately we have people connect the dots when they circle their things, and they end up with like a little EKG sort of plotting for what their organization actually looks like. And they always laugh because they say, so the perfect organization is flatline. And I say, no, the perfect organization is heartline. And
Mhm.
then I can move this onto the change grid and show that. But no, it's never mapped to the +7, minus whatever. Yeah. Okay. So we have them circle it, and then we have them discuss that with their compatriots about where they happen to be. And then I'll ask them, I'll say, now, I don't want you to think for one moment that the perfect score is 0. I think that a company wants to create a certain culture, and how we go about leading the family adds a tremendous contribution to what that culture is going to feel like and how it's going to function and all that. And so based on the kind of industry that you're in and what it is you're trying to accomplish, do you think your organization should be a +1 or even a +2, or maybe a -1 or -2? I don't think I want them to be putting too much or too little. I like them to put the right amount, but the right amount can vary depending on the kind of company we happen to be. And so, for example, what if my company is a social services agency? Well, do you think I should be a 0, or should I maybe lean a little bit in favor of family? Or, can you guys kind of see like, no, that might be a little bit different?
Mhm.
And what if my organization provides nothing but bodyguard services to executives and elites?
Yeah.
Now, what do you think? Do you think they would say that they should be putting the right amount, too much, too little? What do you think? You can all unmute and chime in, feel free. So you think about this,
Focus.
well, you're going to choose another column to put more, but when it comes to leading the family, do you think it's okay
Oh,
that they might put a little bit less or a little bit
yes,
more? Yeah.
a little bit less.
A little bit less, because I'm thinking like, you know what, this is probably, it's not military and it isn't really law enforcement. This is a bodyguard. So they have to be aware of everything, maybe even more so than some people in law enforcement or the military might be doing it. But, and maybe if they get to be too close to the client, or too much in their fields, that can actually compromise their ability to do whatever needs to be done. So I would just like to just say, I've never believed that there is a one size fits all solution for any kind of a client that we've ever worked with. They all need to have their own little custom blend. So I just want to always acknowledge the fact that there is room for subtleties and nuances. There's room for leaning one way or another without overdoing it one way or another. Fair enough?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. And so now, but again, I have to ask them if they say, well, right now we're a -5 and we should really be at least a 0, but because we are, maybe we're an amusement company, we should probably be a little more family oriented, just so that we convey that to our guests that this really is something about them having a good old time. But I'm being treated like a -5 and they need me to behave like a +2. Well, how many of you guys go like, that's a huge gap?
Yeah.
That's a huge gap that has to be closed. And so, David, I'm going through this way because I think you might find that kind of a discussion to have with them individually.
Yes,
And as groups can really be useful as
yes.
they're playing a little bit with this. So let's go
T,
through.
I hate to do this during a Circle of Brilliance call, but I have a 1:30 call I have to join. Can you email me the link to this?
Yeah, I'll have it up on YouTube probably by the end of the day.
Okay, thank you, T.
Yep.
Sorry.
No worries. Have a good appointment. All right. So everybody, let's just talk briefly about the other three. And again, we go through the same pattern. So leading the future. Again, this is about communicating where we're trying to go, what we're trying to do, all that kind of stuff. Paint the picture for the future. Get us really involved and energized, engaged, all around where we're going and why we're going there, why it's so important, all that good sort of stuff. So communicating powerfully, etc. Now, again, we can say, what happens if an organization puts too much emphasis on the future? They're always looking at what tomorrow is going to look like. They're always, what do you think happens? Or how would you counsel an executive who was always talking about what the future is going to hold, what they're going to do, what they're going to become and grow into, and what it's going to translate into? Anyone got any thoughts on what happens if we put too much emphasis on the future? Kathy, you've just unmuted.
Yeah, absolutely. They're just not grounded. They're not paying attention to what's going on around them, and they could actually disrupt any future plans by not actually completing what they need to do today.
There you go. There you go.
Mhm.
And if this is how they're communicating to their staff, what impact does a leader spending too much emphasis on the future have to do with productivity among team members?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you can
gonna be a
disrupt it.
bumpy.
Yeah. That's where
definitely.
it's distracting and disruptive.
Yeah.
Can be done. Right. Oh, Tim, unmute yourself and tell us what you mean by what have you done for me lately?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, sort of to what Kathy was just talking about. I mean, it causes the employees to feel that, you know, the things that the contributions that they're making present day are not receiving the value that they thought that it would receive, certainly in relation to what the company says they're all about from a value standpoint.
Right. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, that's why I think in many cases for myself, I haven't been part of these startups. I think I would be a horrible leader because my brain thinks fast and I'm always focused on creative kinds of things. And so I'm on page 10, wondering why everyone is still on page 2.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it becomes a real issue. I mean, I've certainly met leaders that are very passionate leaders that care very much about people, and they themselves are +7 for those first two tasks. Well, +7 is who you want to hire as a motivational speaker. You know, +7 is who you want to bring in to get the troops all rallied around there. But that does not represent a balanced leader. Or balanced. Well, to David's point, you know, the emotional intelligence is no doubt going to be undermined in other ways. Kathy, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to comment. What also happens is they really do that type of leader tends to lose track of the facts and tends to lose track of operations and what is going on the ground. What is the productivity? Are they meeting goals? Are people focused and connected? Because they are paying attention to some other time that may or may not exist.
Yeah, and may never come. And,
That's
you know, I've
exactly it.
certainly seen, they would call themselves entrepreneurs, but we'll just say people who started a business. And their head is so much in the future, what it's going to look like down the road, and hoping that they're surrounded by like-minded people who support their enthusiasm and their passion, caring about them as like actual people that may or may not be happening, but they share in this excitement for what that future might hold. Can you guys see that they could get together every day and just have this lovely discussion about down the road and how great they're all going to be, and they're so happy to be doing with each other, but then they never do anything.
Yep, that's exactly it. What Kathy just described, because I've always been told that, you know, although I'm trained as a physician, my head is in the clouds. And so every successful project I worked on has been because I had people around me that said, okay, Brian, great idea. How are we going to do it?
Yeah.
And they're the grounded ones, because
Yep.
otherwise we would never get anything done. I could talk about, 6 months without breathing about the vision. I have no problem with that.
That's right. That's right. Now, again, and obviously I've already given you guys the hint of this. We've done pride-based leadership before, but I said 2 of these are transformational. So yeah, leading the family and leading the future is really all about what things can become, what they can grow into, and having all the right people. I get it. That's a very transformational energy, and that energy can be vitally important to an organization. But sooner or later, we do have to get the work of today done, and we got to be meeting our metrics. So we're not late on deliveries, and we're not being sloppy in our ordering, or whatever it happens to be that we need to keep track of. So this transactional kind of stuff is either very uncomfortable, very foreign to a +7 kind of leader. They don't do this. They might even say well, I'm a -7 minus. I don't even notice it. I didn't even know I was supposed to be doing that. Because you guys can kind of hear the
Mhm.
extreme that could exist between that. So I do need, for an organization to be successful, I either need to have someone who can counterbalance the leader, or I need someone who is flexible enough to go through all 4 of these and understand they may not be managing things on a day-to-day basis, but nevertheless, can they appreciate management? Can they, recognize that while they all want the company to grow, growth has to be managed. I wanted a different word than that, but growth has to be properly managed, or it can become its own problem. So,
Mhm.
okay, anywho, what happens if someone puts too little emphasis on the future?
Then they're not growing,
Right, tell me about that. Why wouldn't they be growing?
because they're going to be stagnated with complacency. So it goes back to that
There we go.
sustainable mediocrity.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have a future, if you're not focusing on the future, maybe, just maybe, you're focusing on the present. But I also know a lot of businesses who at a certain point in their evolution stopped looking at the future, stopped adapting to those future changes. And now they're someone that's in the textbooks about great examples of companies that aren't around anymore. They were fantastic for a while, but they kind of got locked in the present and in the past. And ultimately, they just got pulled into the past, their heyday, but they lost it. They didn't watch things. I think you've watched that happen with a lot of department stores.
Yeah, I think a lot of these companies focus on, this is how we've always done it. And,
Yep.
it's been good to us in the past, so we just keep doing it.
Yeah, yep. But we know the world keeps changing.
In fact, would you say that best practices is in that category, what Boris just described? Because it seemed like best practices in many ways is kind of like code for complacency. Like it presumes finality. And so when you hear people say it, well, these are best practices, then there's no growth really.
Yeah. I would love to chime in on this one, because I have very strong feelings about it. Whenever a client says, well, tell me what the best practices are, it's like what goes through my brain, and then I have to translate that to in a way that is tactful and understandable to the client, is then all you want is status quo.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh,
I mean, best practices are simply useful data, but they are not a target. They are not a measure. They are not something that you want to incorporate as a goal for your organization. What you want to do is create a unique organization that can compete. So that's where but I just cringe when I hear the term best practices.
yeah. And I also think the best practices is historical data. They're basically saying, hey, this is where we're at. We're at a good place. How do we get here? Oh, that's a best practice. If those are how we got here, then that's what we should be doing. And then, of course, the thought is that, and we should continue doing it, and everybody else should jump on board and start doing it and continue doing it as well. But we've all heard this idea, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always gotten. But that's not true. if you keep doing what you've always done, you will slowly but surely get diminishing returns because the world keeps changing and you have to adapt. If you're not adapting, then whatever you're doing is only going to be effective for a given period of time, and it's going to slowly but surely lose that effectiveness.
I
So
think there's some great research that's been done by Nadia Zembayeva, I think is the way you pronounce her name. She's a professor at Harvard. I think she's moved on to just doing purely consulting, but she's focused on something called reinvention as the new, the way to get yourself through the next,
Mhm.
5 years, let's say, when we're in this chaotic environment. And so she's coined this phrase called the chief reinvention officer, that every organization needs to have a chief reinvention officer. And she put out a book last year called How to Thrive in Chaos. And in her book, it's more of a tool set and a manual. She's got a number of different frameworks she uses to try to get this conversation going around organizations that need to have this skill set of reinvention and having a focus on the future that's connected to what they're doing today in their business.
That's very interesting. And so I'm going to believe that program is going to help people find this appropriate level of emphasis around the future, where it fits in, where it becomes too much, why having too little is problematic.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. So again, we don't really need to discuss it in any kind of vivid detail, but if you put the right amount of emphasis on the future, what do you end up with? You end up with, what did we have with family? A bunch of happy, good people, get along together, knowing where we're going and working towards getting us there. So, David's back. Hey, David. Okay, so that's the focus. Now, again, we do the same thing, the exercise. We say, all right, if you guys understand what this facet is all about and what happens in an organization is too much, too little, or just enough, all right, why don't you now rate your organization as you experience it? Are they putting too much, too little, or the appropriate amount? Now, to David's application for this, I could certainly, instead of looking at my organization, I could say, what I want you to do is think about your immediate supervisor, your immediate manager, or maybe just go up to say, whoever is in charge of your part of the organization. You can do this as an evaluation of an individual just as much as you can use it as a tool for kind of understanding the overall vibe or the culture of the organization. But again, we're talking about culture on the change grid. So we're saying their organization as they experience, are they putting too much, too little, or just enough emphasis on leading the future? Okay, and then you basically say to them, well, what level do you think would serve your organization best? Again, we don't want you to be too much or too little, but we also may not want you to be flatline in it. So based on your organization, should you be a little bit more future oriented or a little less? I mean, I think if my organization was supposed to be one that was all about predicting trends that were developing the organization, and one of these statistical analysis companies that's trying to tell us where we're all heading, well, I imagine I would probably want to put a little more emphasis on the future. Then because that's that vibes with the company and with the client base that we're ultimately going after. Pardon me. Where let's say, just a second. Okay, never mind. Let's say on the other hand, we'll do a laboratory and I'm charged with finding a vaccine for COVID. Well, I mean, yeah, the future might get talked about, but it's the near future, because we have an issue that needs to be attacked right now. So maybe right now we can put a little bit less emphasis on talking about what our 5 or 10-year plan looks like, and instead talk about what we're going to be doing in the next, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, and in order to take care of the pressing need that exists. Make sense? Yep.
Yes.
No. Now let's go on to leading the focus. This is again, making sure that everybody is doing the right jobs the right way, in the right order. It's all allowing people to focus on whatever it is that needs to be done and making sure that they're doing that focus. And so this involves some management skills about assigning tasks, making sure the tasks that are assigned have been broken down so that people understand exactly how they're expected to get it all done. So it's all been very much about helping people do the right things the right way, get it done, get a whole day's worth of productivity out of people, etc. So you get the idea. This is what leading the focus is all about.
Mm-hmm.
So now, you can do, again, the same thing, and I don't necessarily know that we need to drag ourselves through, but we do want to say, well, what happens if a company puts too much emphasis on what needs to be get done today? What's the obvious thing that gets neglected if we're only focused on today?
The potential competitive forces that need to be addressed,
That's right.
yeah.
Yep. And so I get it. We want to make sure we're doing what needs to be done today, but we have to have a little bit of our ears open to things that aren't necessarily on the schedule, but nevertheless are occurring opportunities I might be stumbling across, things I might be hearing that and it could mean something if I take some time to communicate them. So the more emphasis I place on the focus, the more blinders are being put on people. So yeah, they may be able to work in an environment that's absolutely free from distraction and know exactly what needs to be done, but that doesn't really mean that they aren't missing out some other things. And we as an organization aren't missing out on whatever their other creative capabilities may be.
Right.
If I put too little emphasis on the focus, what happens?
Compromising quality, you might not even produce a complete product or service.
Right. So I may be missing my commitments. So I'm not delivering on time. I'm not paying attention to details. Things are getting careless, sloppy, whatever it can be. So not a good place to be, not a good place to be. If we put appropriate emphasis on it, we get the right people having a good time, doing what needs to be done today with an eye to the future. So that's where we want to be. So again, we'd say now, rate your own organization as you experience it, or we could say rate a particular person based on how much emphasis you experience them placing on that. Then you can ask the question, how much should the organization put on it? Again, you only have 5. Welcome to these little 5 points all we get to play with here. So a little bit of emphasis, a little more, flat line, a little less, even more less, even more less, even less. Even more or less. So
this is a management thing, right? This aspect here is a management thing. So this is a systems approach.
Systems are going to fall into here as well, but it's also the monitoring of the people resource. So to me, this is all about HR as well. We got to have the right people that have been trained the right way, onboarded the right way. But it's because we need them today. We got to get the work done that needs to get done. That work probably came out of this focus on the future. What are the goals that we're going to be working on? What does that vision involve? And everyone really wants to be doing the right things. Well, someone's got to help, corral them, get them focused in a particular direction to get everything done that really needs to be getting done. So you think about all the different people involved in that. To me, that's operations.
Yeah, I was just going to say you're talking about operations here.
Yeah, this is operations.
Okay. And that's a good example of that was in medical school, we read about I think it was at University of Virginia, the surgical residents were losing a lot of patients, and most medical errors are human errors. Yeah. And so instead of them just, getting people through surgery like a manufacturing plant, the consultant asked the surgeons, the surgical residents, to simply ask the question of each patient, why do you want this surgery?
Yeah.
And so when they were asking this question, it said it connected them like the patient was a family member. And so not only did their surgical rates went up, they were doing the surgeries a lot faster. The quality was improved by just simply shifting that mindset to like, hey, this is a human being here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because more often than not, by the time the surgeon actually enters the room, the patient has already been prepped, they're fully draped. The area that needs to be worked on was the only thing that's exposed. And so
Mhm.
they don't know that it's a human being. They just know that this is a certain area. And oh, look, I get to go digging around inside to see what's what. So yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
Hey, T, I just wanted to say when we were talking about too little emphasis on focus, I'm thinking in terms of where we talk about perceived importance on the change grid.
Uh-huh.
When there's too little emphasis on focus, I think it leaves room for chaos and conflict, because there can be varying views around what's important, what's valuable in the moment.
Absolutely. In fact, by the time we're done with this, I want to talk about how I've used this as a tool for individual coaching as well, because you are the leader of your life. And what happens when you think about your life, your daily activities, your personal goals, etc. If you put too much or too little emphasis on family, future, focus, facts, what's the right combo for you to be leading yourself effectively to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So I do think it's a great little tool. First of all, I just think it's interesting. And my audiences have always appreciated being given an exercise that's interesting at the very least. Meaningful, yeah. Practical and applicable, even better, but they'd like it to be interesting. So I think that this is resonating with a lot of different applications in those ways and even more. Okay, let's take a look at the last little column. This is the facts. So this is keeping track of stuff. These are the metrics that matter. And so maybe it's nothing more than expenses and income. Maybe it's about different sources of revenue. Maybe it's about different activities. Every single company has their own set of metrics that they should be watching very, very carefully. And we could spend days just talking about the kinds of metrics and when you get too many metrics, or when you end up being buried under a pile of data and you don't know what the data really means or how to begin to approach it. So that whole sort of subject falls into case here. So yeah. So what happens if an organization puts too much emphasis on keeping track of things and being data driven, using the data for evaluations, promotions, decisions? What happens if an organization puts too much emphasis on the facts?
Resistance.
Tell me about resistance.
We're seeing that now with physicians, right? So the EHR, the electronic health records, and everything's about how you code, what you code for, how it goes into the system. So they don't want to do it.
You're going to get pushback from the people who have to report on whatever these activities or behaviors happen to be. Yep. What else?
You lose the heart of the organization that way. I mean, it's and it comes back to family and the things that are missing, but people become robots, and it takes the humanity out of the work.
That's right.
And I think it creates a level of bureaucracy, and organizations start to stagnate because they get the weight of having to analyze all the time. These facets drives people crazy, and it it's analysis by paralysis.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you guys an example of this once we finish this little column here. All right, so too much emphasis on the numbers. We are getting all those things you guys are talking about. Also, we're forgetting that numbers only give you a certain type of information, a certain quantity of information. How many of you still acknowledge that people's hunches and instincts and intuition and feelings have to have a place where they can actually be factored? I mean, okay, so Well, Brian, okay, you're a physician. You know, how often do you go in looking at a patient and all the clinical data, all the test results say that X is true, and you go, I don't care if X says it's true or not. It's
Yeah,
not feeling right. Something's wrong.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we have to make space for that in order for the company to do that. Oh yeah, and Tim's talking about data bias. Tim, feel free to unmute if you'd like to explain why data bias can be an issue.
Yeah, I was just thinking, whatever the author of the data wants, whatever their perspective and view and value is, perhaps they can grab enough data to support that and push it out into the organization.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
the idea that data is neutral and it's not.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
It gets
Right.
weaponized. It gets weaponized. Yep, yep, yep. All right. What happens if we put too little emphasis on the numbers, too little emphasis on the facts?
Go bankrupt.
Yeah. Money? Did
That's
I run
about the
out of
best way I
money?
can put it.
Yeah.
That's,
Go bankrupt.
that's awesome.
Out of business.
Yeah, you struggle, ultimately you fail, and so you don't know what to be doing. You have nothing on which to base any of the decisions you're making. So you're right, ultimately you end up bankrupt. I like that. We should just leave it there. Too little, one word in the whole bottom block, bankrupts. All right, obviously, if you put the right emphasis, and again, I would be saying like, it's not just about data, it's about collecting the right data. And about then you have to use that data. One of my biggest clients is doing customer experience management, data sort of studies and all that. So it's got a great place, but it's got to be the right data. And it has to be put to proper use. I was in sales, like so many of you spent time in sales as well, and I had to do more sales reports than I certainly wanted to be doing. And the thing that I always wondered about them was, does anybody ever even look at these things? I mean, these are back in the days of handwritten sales reports. There was nothing automated quite yet. So, you just go like, okay, this is just a piece of paper. I could put anything I want on this, and no one's ever going to know if it's right or wrong. And so there's that pushback.
Plus with the numbers and the data bias that Tim was talking about, I know a lot of people in the finance industry and I always say you can make numbers to reflect anything you want.
That's right. Behold the power of statistics. There's a way to manipulate the data to get it to say whatever you want to say. So, all right, anyway, so we can see what's really going on here. Okay, now I do want to give you, again, you complete the exercise, allow them to have this discussion with their table mates or whatever, let them share where their experience of the company is, whatever you set them up for the parameters of that exercise. Let them talk about all that. Where should the company be? Should we be putting a little bit more emphasis, a little less emphasis, whatever? Should we be learning from the data? And you might even say that when a company is getting there's trouble forming, maybe even having a +3 might be okay. Just because I need to do some sort of an intervention, and that intervention needs to be based on the facts of what's going on. So maybe I'm going to be up here between +2 and +3, depending on the situation. So, lots of fun discussions you can have around this. Now, here's my concern and why I wanted to bring this all up. It has to do with the topic for this series, which is culture. So when I look at the different tracing patterns people give me when I say connect the dots to the numbers you circled, this is the culture of the organization as you experience it. So do you think I can get away saying that? Do you think that's legit when I say the culture of the organization is what you define it to be, because you're the one who's experiencing whatever that.
I think you've covered all the facets. So I think you could say legitimately that that's culture.
Yeah, this is the culture. Now, is it the company's culture, or this is just my experience of the company's culture? And then if I can look at a group of people, I can see, are there patterns in their thing? And then the more patterns that I see, consistent patterns, the more I can say that this is not just one person's experience, the culture defined by one person's experience. This is culture as being defined or by the experiences of many people. that are in it. So executive offices, you can say the culture is whatever you want to call it, but I'm telling you, the culture is what people experience it to be. And this is telling us what they experience that to be. Now, so I do think it's a great tool for impacting culture, because then I could say, look, this was the results. These were the averages. We had 200 people fill this out. We hand compiled the data because this isn't automated. But here's what we learned. I suppose I could just put it together in a Survey Monkey kind of a thing. But nevertheless, this is what we're looking at. This is your organization. What would you want to adjust it to? And we can use it as a foundation for any kind of discussions about what the culture might need to do. But let me give you an example about this tool being used to explain a problem. Without naming the company, if you guys know the company I'm talking about, do not say it, because I'd like to be able to feel free to put this recording up, and I don't want to hear from anyone's legal department. But I had a Fortune 10 company clients for a very long time, and the company is over 100 years old. And so it's had a lot of changes to its culture, but this company was always known for being the absolute best training ground for sales representatives anywhere. So in their heyday, this was the place you wanted to work. This was the place you wanted to be part of the sales organization. And they were very well rewarded and acknowledged and celebrated. It was a sales-driven organization. Now, over the course of time, for reasons I don't really know, little by little, how much do you think it was driven by stocks, by the shareholders? But little by little, someone came along and said, you would get better results for the stakeholders if you put more emphasis on, and the big deal here was metrics. Everything should be measured. And so over the course of about a decade, the company moved from being a sales-driven organization, highly profitable, highly regarded, to ultimately an accounting department-driven company. The company is driven by the accounting department. And so the accounting department said, well, there's a lot of things that right now you're spending on these salespeople. We're going to get rid of that. So forget the rewards trips, forget the big bonuses, forget all that kind of stuff. We've hired people to do a job. We're paying them a very good wage. We're paying them a remarkable commission above and beyond that. So we don't need to be doing this. And so they put even more emphasis on metrics. As my last time working with the company, the average sales representative spent 60% of their time every single week reporting on their sales activities and having discussions about their sales activities with their manager.
Wow.
They were only spending 40% of their time actually doing income generating activities or revenue generating activities. And then again, who I forget who earlier in the call said, and we don't want to fill out all these reports. So you've gotten pushback. So what ultimately happens, you realize, hey, this didn't work. And so rather than restoring the organization to a sales-driven organization, they basically, and again, they don't know they did this. They discovered this after going through this exercise. They have systematically put less and less emphasis on family and future, and more emphasis on focus and facts.
So less leadership, more management.
Less leadership, more management. Less leadership, more management. When they found out that that didn't work, they put even less emphasis on family and future, and even more emphasis on future and facts. When that didn't work, guess what they did? They
Double down.
They put even more emphasis on the focus and the facts, and pretty much emphasis on family and future has been set aside for special occasions only.
Mm.
And so this is an organization that may very well have been putting a little too much emphasis on family and future, but given +3, +4 historically, and they were hovering around maybe a 0, -1 when it came to the focus and the facts, because people were getting it done. Happy people do their work. And so they were, it was all pretty good, but boy, they wanted greater and greater returns for those shareholders. So they ended up creating, the last time we ran this with the organization, they were averaging -5, -6 on future, or their on family and future, and +6, +7 on focus and facts.
Mm.
And then they wonder why people are leaving right and left, and they're struggling to find and retain new hires.
What
Too
are they
bad
doing
nobody
with the
ever called and
evidence?
asked you.
Yeah,
Right.
well, the thing is that I told them this over and over and over and over again. But you know what? Who said that they get locked in their own patterns? And
Yeah.
you know, or can make numbers say whatever they want those numbers to say. So, you know, it's a strange dynamic. Nevertheless, it's a dynamic. And now I can tell you that that organization, the only growth that organization has accomplished and is able to report growth is because they've acquired many, 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 much smaller companies. And whenever you acquire a company, you acquire whatever their revenue happens to be. Yeah, you encounter their whatever their expenses are as well, but nevertheless, there it is.
Yeah, but
All right,
their
so
cultural behavioral patterns will still take over that at some point.
this is exactly right. And so you can see they changed the culture, but this change in culture they created ended up having detrimental impact on performance and productivity, et cetera.
Wow.
All right, so if you guys found this interesting, is this, I mean, no one dropped off the call, that's always reassuring. So, yeah. Any thoughts about?
Yes, I think it's a really useful tool and a good conversation about how individual perceptions can be bundled into cultural patterns.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. Now, what we're going to do next time around is we're going to focus our attention on, we're going to assume that because they hired us, they were able to reduce this too much emphasis or put a little more emphasis on the right thing. So we're going to say, let's look about all the possibilities inside of appropriate emphasis that could still create variations in effective cultures. And then where do those variations in effective cultures live on the change grid? And then we can talk a lot about how we go about then modifying or maximizing the benefit of a particular culture. So is this a different discussion about culture than you guys have had in other culture?
Yes,
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. Okay,
it's a good one, T.
All righty. Glad you're enjoying it. So we'll pick up where we left off next time around. So we're going to have a good couple of days and talk to you on Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.